One of the things that I found interesting about this issue, ever since Colorado and Washington went the way they did, is how come we're not hearing about from the hard right wing about how horrible this is? I mean, we hear all about how gay marriage is going to destroy America. But how come they've been so, not that I want them to speak up on this, but how come they've been so silent about this? How come nobody's talking about, how come they're not bashing the liberals for marijuana reforms and for letting pot take control of the country?
Some are, of course, but two, like all the Republicans have been like, even though they don't believe in states' rights, have been talking about states' rights so much. And the fact that these two states exercise their states' rights, it's ridiculous for them to jump on top of them right after. But I actually have another point and a question. But my first point is one of the things that the Obama administration might have looked at is the 11th Amendment implications of this. Because before weed was legalized in Colorado and Washington, there was like a lot of noise from like the UN that this would violate like international treaties. But the 11th Amendment actually forbids the United States government, the federal government, from assisting any foreign power or different state from suing another state. So basically, there's not a lot they can do like legally if the states use 11th Amendment arguments as their defense. But my other question was, in the South, gay marriage or marijuana? Which one will we get first?
Ooh.
Go.
I'll have to say marijuana.
Yeah,
I think I'll go with marijuana.
I'm going with marijuana.
I agree.
Excellent question. But I wanted to go with the point that you had brought up, Brian, about why is the right wing silent? Well, they haven't so much been silent. They've actually been doing actions, and by that I mean we've been seeing a lot of states doing these drug testing laws. And I think that kind of ties in because, you know, and it's not just because of marijuana that they're doing these drug testing laws. It's also an attack on the poor. So it's kind of a multi-pronged approach.
It's about criminalizing the poor as well as minorities. So there's also racism there.
And as well as trying to say, because remember they'll test for all drugs.
Right.
And,
but the two, those two,
that the Air Force, remember with the whole Chobani yogurt thing?
I was just going to bring that up. What about forces bases or Air Force bases that are in Colorado or Washington? Are their members allowed to smoke pot?
I think it's
not.
like alcohol.
No, I'm sorry, because I know the rule does say they have control over federal properties and they're going to keep that. So I know, but it's just a funny thought.
I think the welfare, drug testing, and this are like two completely separate issues. I don't think that one is a response to the others. But I think one of the big problems that the Republican Party has is that these medical marijuana and personal usage of marijuana are both big government issues, that they're on the side of big government. Like, they want to get between you and your doctor if your doctor thinks that you can smoke pot, and they want to get between you and your own adult decisions if you want to smoke pot recreationally. So they run into big problems after ginning up all the states' rights hysteria. So, like,
God, that's such a good point.
They kind of have to back it up.
I love the hypocrisy that you pointed out. That's fantastic.
Well, that's a good point. It also reminds me that I wanted to mention that we also mustn't rest on our laurels if more and more states start to pass laws for medical marijuana. That's not good enough because the big pharma companies, they don't want recreational marijuana legalized because that would take away money from them. They just want medical marijuana legalized. That's as far as they want it to go because then they have absolute control over the supply and the money that's being exchanged.
Well, it's funny too with what Sean said because wasn't it just recently released that all that hype about welfare and testing, that in all the people they tested, I think they've come up with, 12 people who failed the test or something like that. All the money...
Yeah, approximately 2%.
Yeah, all the money and all the time they're expending to test these people, and they've come up with it's kind of exactly like the voter fraud issue. You know,
And
let's
that,
throw all
that
this and make this a big smoke and mirrors thing, so that we don't have to look at the real world.
and not only that, the one last point that I want to make to build on Brian's is that, you know, if you're a fiscal conservative and seeing all this money that's wasted with no return, that's got to piss you off. I mean, if I think of myself as somewhat fiscally realistic in a lot of respects, and I know a lot of people would probably disagree with me on that point, but I think on this point, you've just wasted all of this money, and not to mention Florida wasted all that money doing the same thing, and it ended up in the pockets of the governor's wife. So, I mean, if you're a fiscal conservative, this has got to piss you off.
Up here in Canada, that was kind of the thing. I mean, a lot of people may be under the misinformation that no, pot is not legal or decriminalized up here. It is still an offense to grow or have. But what the government did, and we're going back probably 20 years now, they realized that it's not that they turn a blind eye to it, it's that they're not going to spend the time and effort that it was taking to arrest these people and charge them and send them through the courts, because they started to discover what a waste of money that was, because most of the people, as it is, unlike where you are, they weren't being sent to jail. We don't have mandatory minimums for possession charges and things like that. So all these people were going through the courts. Charges were being dropped, charges were being dismissed, people were getting slaps on the wrists and fines, and it was costing us way, way more in police effort and court costs to try this stuff than it was to just turn a blind eye and go. So now, you know, when the cops, if the cops catch you with it, it's not like they're pulling you over and looking for it, but if they happen to catch you with it, it's like, okay, we'll take that from you and we'll smoke it. I mean, we'll dispose it. So that's kind of the way it worked up here. And it was a fiscal thing where people started to realize what a waste of time and money this was. But the only thing we went short, we didn't legalize it, we didn't decriminalize it. We just said, okay, yeah, let's go on to bigger and better things.
Yeah, one last.
I think that I'm sorry, but I just wanted to kind of build on that and say that I think that it would become legalized in Canada, and more countries. But I think that the United States has. I think the United States has to. I think the United States has to lead the way. I think that once the United States federally legalizes marijuana, that other countries are going to follow suit and take that lead.
Up here, it is a big issue right now. In fact, I think it's going to be a very big part of the next prime minister elections. Is going to be marijuana reforms and law reforms on that particular front. We've got a lot of the people that we know are going to be running for prime minister, or think are going to be running for prime minister, coming out and either changing things they've said in the past about pot and pot laws, a lot more positive talk about it. So I think it's going to be a big issue up here, and I can see it happening fairly soon up here. One of the big stumbling blocks for Canada in reforming marijuana laws for a long time was actually the United States, because the U.S. kept threatening Canada with sanctions and so on and so forth if we were to relax our laws, because states claimed that it would cause problems at their borders, and we would be a bad country for doing it. So for a long time, the reason we didn't reform laws was because of American pressure. Now that that pressure is released, and now with all the new medical studies coming out, attitudes politically are changing here a lot. And I don't know for anybody who remembers our Prime Minister, Pierre Elliott Trudeau, one of the most famous prime ministers we've ever had. It's actually his son who is now potentially running for prime minister in the next election, and he's done a huge turnaround. He's a young guy, And he used to be very anti-pot, and now he's coming out and changing all his tunes. So things north of the border are looking promising on that respect, and I can see it happening very soon.
Good.
I just wanted to say that Canada, I'm pretty sure Canada does not have the same, is extensive of a problem of lobbying as America does, and I don't think they have an extensive use of for-profit private prisons.